Dragon Tail Time, Part 2. My name is Daniel Valles, and welcome to our channel. In a number of our videos, we've been studying the Revelation chapter 12 sign, the promise of the Lord's soon return. And in it, we've been talking about different parts of the signs, and there's a lot of information in the booklet. It's 40 pages. Definitely download it. You can find a link in the description box. This sign was given in advance so the world would know it and be able to see it on the horizon, because it tells us important things about the time around it. But it also informs our understanding of where we are right now, too. And we've been looking at the part of chapter 12 that describes the celestial sign, and how the Bible tells us there are actually two celestial signs going on. And this is so important to understand Revelation chapter 12. A lot of people focus on just the woman part of the sign, and they completely miss that right in the middle of the woman sign, John pauses and describes that there is another sign going on at the same time, in context, while the woman is pregnant, before she does give birth. And it's all about the red dragon and how the stars of heaven are going to fall to the earth before the woman gives birth. And so this is a very important sign that tells us a lot of things are happening before the Revelation 12 sign occurs on September 23rd. This is very important. And if a teacher does not address this or acknowledge this, or even acknowledge that it exists even, they are deceiving themselves and they are deceiving you. Because this is crucial to understanding the entire Revelation 12 sign. Because it tells us important events that will happen before she does give birth. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people who are looking toward September 23rd and they think that's rapture. But no, there are events that the Bible foretells us in advance that are going to be happening before she gives birth. And this is what we've been studying in our previous videos, and how John breaks it down that there's three different stages to this sign. What is the dragon doing with his tail? John describes how while the woman is still in the pregnancy cycle in the latter part of it, while she's in the period typically associated with travailing in birth and pain to be delivered, she's getting ready to deliver the child. In the time leading up to the birth, John describes a celestial sign, which is a celestial clock, and he's just noting a movement over time that that sign makes and what happens during that time. He is observing that there is a period of some incredible events that are happening during this time of travail. And so he observes and records that the dragon's tail is sweeping and drawing over the third part of the stars of heaven. And then in a separate stage, they are then cast to the earth. And then the final stage is where the dragon at the end of that sweep is now positioned to where it's in front of the woman right at the time of delivery. So all this sweeping of the third part of the stars of heaven takes place and finishes right as she's about to give birth. So all this takes place before the birth, before September 23rd. And so this is very important. If we want to have a true understanding of the Revelation 12 sign, we cannot ignore the white elephant that's in the middle of the room. John put this right in the middle of the woman's sign to let us know this is going on, and it's important to understand this is going on before the birth. And he emphasizes the stars are going to be cast to the earth. What this is exactly, we don't know for sure, but we do know it's significant enough that he records it, and that it will at least appear for sure as though these stars are falling to the earth. And it's going to be a third of the sky. So very significant. And of course, it reminds us what Christ told his disciples in Matthew 24 about how there would be these significant events with the sun being darkened and the moon not giving her light and the stars falling from heaven and the powers of heaven being shaken before the sign of the Son of Man appears in heaven, which is on September 23rd. Even Jesus told the disciples when he was here on earth that these events would happen. And then in the book of Revelation, John again emphasizes that these stars and all these other events that Christ described will be taking place before the sign appears, before she does give birth. And so this is vital to understanding where we are now, because we are sometime before the September 23rd event, and there's still a number of weeks where these events can transpire, and we are told that they will transpire. We're told by Jesus and John in two separate accounts that these events will happen before she gives birth. And so we need to pay attention to these, also considering that Christ specifically emphasized to the disciples he's coming before any of the tribulation events start. He's coming during the days of Noah and Lot, while life is still going on like normal. There's still food on the shelves, people are buying and selling, the economy hasn't collapsed, people are still planning for future educations and families and living as though life goes on, because nothing has disrupted the world yet. And Jesus emphasized this is when he was coming for his wise servants. And this is why we needed to listen to his instructions and what he foretold us about. Because we're not looking to the September 23rd sign. We're looking and expecting him sometime before that, knowing that he foretold us that there's going to be significant events that happen before that sign completes. And when you look at the tribulation events described in Revelation that he details to John, we know for sure, in addition to what Christ said before, that the conditions of Christ's return, the days of Noah and Lot, that will stop as soon as the very first seal is opened. Christ is coming before any of the tribulation events start. And so understanding and even acknowledging that this celestial sign exists within the context of this other sign, understanding this time informs us of where we are in time. If you ignore that sign or you explain it away as, oh, that's only symbolic, then that will mess with your understanding of Christ's instructions, number one, and you'll misunderstand the timing of his return, and you'll misunderstand the Revelation 12 sign. When you ignore half of John's descriptions about the Revelation 12 sign, you will come to a misunderstanding about it. This is why we have to include it and examine it to have a better understanding of the time surrounding September 23rd. Understanding that there's going to be events leading up to that date. Very significant events. And we've been studying this sign and the details that he gave about it to try and figure out an idea of when this time of travail would start. When would this time of sudden destruction start? And we've noted how he describes the tail sweeping a third of the sky. And so we've looked at the entire ecliptic, which is 360 degrees, and we've divided that by 3, and that gives you 120 degrees. And so since that tail sweep happens and finishes right at the birth time, you just back up from the birth time, 120 degrees rotation. And with those calculations, that brought our understanding to that time that he described on that celestial sign would have started around May 20th, going with a third of the ecliptic, 360 degrees. And it would rotate a third of the total sky till where Draco was then facing the woman. And we always got to keep in mind that Jesus told John and gave these instructions to John to send to the churches. Not only did he tell his disciples, but he also made sure that John sent the information to the churches. Why? Because this information is for us. We are to know that there is going to be a time of travail before September 23rd. Before the woman gives birth, while she's still travailing with child, there are going to be events of sudden destruction on the earthly level and then also in the heavens. The powers of the heavens are going to be shaken. The stars are going to fall from heaven. There's going to be some very significant events that happen while the woman is travailing with child. And this warning is given to the churches in advance, so we will look at it and back up our understanding, knowing that Christ is coming before those events start. And we've talked about how it's important to understand the audience, the 7 churches that John was writing to. They were in Asia Minor. They were a large distance away from Jerusalem. They were heavily steeped in the Greek culture and in the Roman government and politics at the time. They were Gentile churches. And so the 7 churches, when we understand their culture, their educational background, when we understand the audience that he was writing to, the Gentile audience he was writing to, that helps us understand what he's describing to them because he knew they would understand what he was writing. And we've talked about the province of Cilicia, where the Apostle Paul was from. He was from Tarsus, the city of Tarsus. But we also talked about the notable writer Aratus, who was from that same province and possibly the same city as Paul too. That writer was very well known for his poem, The Phenomena, which was all about astronomy and constellations. And this piece of literature was just as popular as Homer's Iliad at that time. A lot of people got their understanding of the constellations and astronomy at that time from this poem. This is the one that Apostle Paul quoted from. But we talked about how it specifically describes Draco as the fiery serpent dragon. And so the 7 churches fully understood this sign that John was describing in the letters that were sent to the 7 churches. He was describing something that they were very familiar with, and even how it moved throughout the night sky. And so again, when we understand the audience he was writing to and the familiarity of Aratus' poem, The Phenomena, it was so familiar even the Apostle Paul practically had it memorized too, the Bible tells us. We have multiple things that help us narrow down in our time what their understanding of the book of Revelation and the letters that they received from John. And it's also important to note where the book of Revelation was written from. It was written when John was on the Isle of Patmos, which is extremely important because the Bible actually records where this book was written from. It was written not too far away from where these 7 churches were. In this Greek and Roman culture was where the book of Revelation was written even. 2 Gentile churches with a Greek understanding of astronomy. And so the more we understand the background and the details that Scripture gives us, the better our understanding of the Revelation 12 sign becomes. And also the details of the celestial clock and timing that he's describing with the dragon tail time. And I've been studying it some more because I had a feeling that there was some more information to it. There was more to it, and the Lord's been giving wisdom and understanding. And as we dig deeper into the depths, we see more details that narrow down the exact time frame that he's describing. Now, I noticed in phase A of the dragon tail time that he mentions his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. I thought that was interesting because I didn't notice it before, but he's describing, in the sign, he's describing the sky, the heavens, and the earth, which means he's describing a horizon view. He's not seeing 100% space and stars. There's also earth in the picture too. And I realized this helps narrow down what he's talking about, a 3rd part of the stars. Because it's not a complete view of the sky, it's only a half view of the sky. I've been trying to put myself into the shoes of John, who was a sailor. He was a fisherman, and so he's very familiar with celestial navigation, and he'd often fish at night, and so he's very used to getting around by the stars, using the stars for navigation. But I got to thinking, and the way he describes in Revelation 12:2, he was describing a view that included the horizon cutting off half the sky, half of the celestial sphere. He's describing a sky view that only goes 180 degrees. When we consider the celestial dome, the appearance of it, what we see every single day is only half the picture. We never see the whole sphere at once. And so this got me to thinking, when he's describing a 3rd, he's describing it from an observer's view, including the horizon, which obscures half of the stars of heaven. And this greatly narrows down the focus of what he means by a 3rd of the stars of heaven, because he does remark that a 3rd of those stars are cast down to the earth, which he also includes in the view. And so I went into Stellarium and just considered, he's on the island of Patmos, which is not very big either, and he's used to observing this celestial sky at night and just as a sailor. So we're going to go with a ocean view with no obstructions, a great view of the sky. And he remarks that the celestial countdown of the dragon tail time ends when the woman is giving birth. And so that's going to be the final tick on the celestial clock. So let's start there and then we'll work backwards. And so when we look at the sky and we just take into account where the constellations are going to be on that date, Draco, because its location near Polaris, is always going to be above the horizon. This was true even in John's time. And so the entire skies rotate around Polaris, around that pole star. And Polaris, the pole star, is very important to navigation using the stars. And of course back then they would look to that region around which the sky rotated. Polaris wasn't a pole star at that time, but is right in that area. So they would still be looking at that exact same area, but he is seeing a sign in our time where Polaris is the axis, where it is the pole star. And because the celestial dome is at a tilt, you have a equal division going from west to east, dividing the sky by 180 degrees. And so when John describes that the tail is going to move and sweep over a 3rd of the stars, we have to take into consideration his perspective as an observer on Earth observing the horizon. He's describing a 3rd of only 180 degrees. So we get out our calculator and we divide 180 degrees by 3, and that gives us 60 degrees. So on 923, the celestial dome, and we'll just use the sun as a reference point because it will rotate at the same speed as the celestial dome, the sun is roughly at 180 degrees on 923. And so what we need to do is back up using that as a reference point of 60 degrees, a 3rd of the sky. And that will bring us to July 23rd, when the sun, which is moving constantly with the rest of the sky dome, that will be at 120 degrees. So between 7:23 and 9:23, the entire sky is moving 60 degrees. And since Draco rotates around Polaris, the tail will be moving through the sky and around the pole a third of the sky over that time. And here you can see the transition over time, how it will move and sweep a third of the sky. A third of the apparent sky for one who is observing the horizon, using the pole star. And keeping in mind the tilt of the celestial sphere, the portion that is offset above the horizon is also offset below the horizon behind the observer. And so the portion we see sticking up above the horizon in front of us is equally down below the horizon behind us. So when we consider wrapping around behind us, the tail is still sweeping an entire third of the sky. A third of the sky to an observer. And so when we look at a calendar between now and September 23rd, just taking to mind sometime right around July 22nd, 23rd, depending on your time zone, that appears to be a start mark of John describing the celestial movements that Draco is going to be making. And the events are going to happen within that time frame that he, as an observer, is seeing in the celestial sign taking place in the heavens, and also how it impacts the earth. There is the horizon in view as well. He's describing a third of the visible sky, what is above the horizon. And John is describing that during this tail sweep time, there's going to be some significant events, particularly the stars falling to the earth. And this also matches what Jesus said about the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. There's going to be some very significant events in the heavens taking place, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, when the Virgin in heaven gives birth to Emmanuel, the rehearsal of that story that takes place in heaven. And when we study and compare that with the more details given in the book of Revelation later on, we can see what's going to happen within that celestial time, a third of the visible sky. But we also have to keep in mind that John is describing specifically events that take place in seal 6. That's where he records that the stars fall from heaven. And so don't jump to conclusions and say, oh, the rapture is going to happen on July 22nd. No. That's apparently when seal 6 will start, or at least start sometime within that time. There's still some events that have to happen before that, apparently, although they could happen within that time. All we know is that John describes seal 6 is happening within that clockwork time that he's describing, that clockwork movement that Draco's tail is making. And when we compare it with the other events that also happened in the first and second seal, with the Great War that kills a quarter of the world's population, and famine and pestilence, we can also see how that also seems to fit with this 1/3 of the visible sky as well, because you need to have about at least 40 days for famine to really kick in, and so that also seems to match the time described as well. All we know is sometime around July 22nd, the celestial clockwork of a third of the visible sky would appear to start. And other major events possibly happening right before that, but definitely major events in the heavens happening before September 23rd. And so this understanding of what we've been forewarned about thousands of years ago helps back us up to where we are now. On this wise man journey, this time that we've been brought to here, we haven't been brought up to September 23rd. No, we've been dropped off, so to speak, at this time here. We're at a time when we are expecting our beloved to call us, rise up, rise up. We are at a time when we're awaiting our mediator, and the more that we study what he has told us, what he has told the disciples, the instructions he even gave the churches, the more we understand what has our Redeemer told us, the more we find reinforcement of the time where we are at right now is very important. And we should be expecting our mediator, our Redeemer, to return. And the more that we look up and we lift up our heads and we study and we consider what has our Redeemer told us. He's told us what's going to be happening, and he's also told us that he's coming before certain of those events happen. That tells us when we should be expecting our Redeemer, and that time is right now. We do not know the day or hour, but we do know this is a time when we should be looking up, expecting our Redeemer, expecting the pickup of the purchased possession. If you have not yet, definitely download our booklet, When to Watch. And when we study what has Christ told us to watch for, the events and the timing, we find that that brings us to where we are right now, this particular time of the year. The late springtime, early summertime, where we are right now, this is when he wants us to expect our beloved. Also download our booklet, the Revelation chapter 12 sign. There's a lot of information in there, and Lord willing, we're going to update it with this new information very shortly. But there is a lot of information in there to study, and Christ foretold us this because he wanted us to know it in advance. And that information helps back up our understanding of when we should be expecting him. And also download the booklet, Time of Perplexity, which also ties into the really bizarre events that are recorded in the book of Revelation that take place before the Revelation 12 sign. There is going to be a time of perplexity with some extremely unnatural events. And we also have a new resource, definitely download it, the Wise Men Learning Journeys. We finally have it together onto one poster. It's a 2-foot by 3-foot poster, link in the description box. But this really helps you understand and view we've been given celestial signs that have drawn our attention, because God wants to direct our attention to where we are now. He's already given us information in his word about what's on the horizon and the events that are going to happen getting close to that, the time of travail. When we look up and we lift up our heads, we find that our attention has been drawn to right now. That also ties in with what our Redeemer told us of when to expect him. We are called to be wise servants. We are called to listen to what he has told us and to live accordingly. As we see all these things coming together, we should be looking with our heart and with our life, living as though our Lord is about to return, going forward on the instructions that he has given us, not ignoring any parts, studying what he has told us, and living accordingly, expecting him to come. He constantly reminds the churches to listen to what the Spirit saith unto the churches. And the Spirit is the Comforter, which reminds us of what our bridegroom has said. And the more that we listen to the instructions and we use that to mold our understanding and to inform us, then we can go forward wisely. Then we can shine bright. If we listen and follow what we're supposed to do, then we will be wise. And he wants us to have an ear to hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. Not just hear it with our heads, but hear it and apply it in our life. And so we're at a time where we see the day approaching. We're at this time, we're at this day of expectation where we are awaiting our mediator any moment now. And so we need to encourage one another into love and to good works. We need to pray for one another and encourage one another. And I highly want to encourage you, if you have a prayer request, share it. Let us know. We will pray for you. If you have asked for prayer in the past, now is a good time to just post a prayer request update and just remind us all so we can keep on praying for you. Now is a time when we need to be praying for one another, bearing one another's burdens. Now is a time when we need to be encouraging each other. The bridegroom cometh. Let's rise up. Let's trim our lamps. Let's cast off the works of darkness and let's put on the armor of light. Let's rise up and let's draw nigh to our Redeemer. And let's serve him first and highest above all else. Maranatha.